motion exercises with the person's shoulders. There are 4 exercises for the person's shoulders. Deborah holds Mr. Field's wrist with one hand and puts her other hand under his elbow. She then raises Mr. Field's arm straight alongside his ear and then lowers his arm back to his side. This is called flexion and extension. Flexion means bending a body part, and extension means straightening a body part. Remember, you will do this exercise at least 5 times. Next, Deborah moves Mr. Field's arm out away from his body and returns it to his side. Moving the body part away is abduction. Moving a body part toward the body is adduction. In the next exercise, Deborah carries the hand to the opposite shoulder, then back out to shoulder level. This is called horizontal abduction and adduction. Finally, she raises Mr. Field's elbow so that it is at the same height as his shoulder, and then moves the forearm up and down. This motion is called rotation. Rotation means turning a joint. When you have finished 5 rotations, move on to the range of motion exercises for the elbow and forearm. Now, Deborah exercises Mr. Field's elbow. Deborah supports Mr. Field's wrist with one hand and his elbow with the other. She flexes his elbow by bending his arm so that he touches his shoulder. Then she extends his elbow by straightening his arm. Flexion and extension are repeated at least 5 times. Then Deborah exercises Mr. Field's forearm. She turns Mr. Field's hand so his palm is down, called pronation, and then turns his hand so his palm is up, called supination. The exercises are repeated at least 5 times. To exercise Mr. Field's wrist, Deborah holds his wrist with one hand and his fingers with the other. This supports the joint and also maintains proper body alignment. She first flexes the hand downward and then extends the wrist. She hyperextends the wrist by moving the hand back and then straightens the wrist again. Next, she moves the wrist from one side to the other side. Remember, move each joint gently and smoothly. Never move the joint if it causes pain for the person. Finally, she tilts the hand downward toward the feet and then brings the thumb up toward the nose. Each of the wrist exercises are repeated at least 5 times. When you exercise the fingers and the thumb, remember to support the joints. Hold the person's hand like this. Deborah makes a fist with Mr. Field's hand to flex the fingers. Then she straightens the fist by extending the fingers one at a time. Next, she spreads the thumb apart and then back again. She repeats this motion between each of the fingers. For the next exercise, Deborah bends Mr. Field's thumb in toward the palm. She then moves the thumb to the side of the fingers. Remember to repeat each motion 5 times. Finally, she brings the thumb to the tip of each finger. There are 4 exercises to do with the thumb and fingers. Next, Deborah exercises Mr. Field's hip. She folds the bath blanket to expose his hip and leg. To support the hip and knee during the exercises, she places one hand under Mr. Field's knee and the other under his ankle. Deborah bends his knee and moves it up toward his head. This exercise will flex the knee and hip. To extend the knee and hip, Deborah straightens the knee and then lowers the leg to the bed. Next, she moves Mr. Field's leg out away from his body and back again until it touches the other leg. Finally, she turns the leg inward and then outward. This motion will rotate the hip. When she has finished these rotations, she moves down to the ankle. To support the ankle, Deborah puts one hand under Mr. Field's ankle and grasps Mr. Field's foot upward toward his head and then downward. Next, she rotates his ankle by turning the foot inward and then out away from the body. The toes are exercised last. Deborah supports the joint by putting one hand under Mr. Field's foot and the other on top of his foot over the toes. She flexes the toes by curling them downward and then straightens the toes. Next, she carefully spreads each toe one at a time. When you have finished with the toes, raise the bed rail and move to the other side of the bed and do the same range of motion exercises working from head to toe. When all the exercises are complete, Deborah positions Mr. Field so he is comfortable. She adjusts the head of the bed to a comfortable position and places the call button within his reach and then unscreens him. Deborah remembers to wash her hands and records the procedure.